recall covering. Mulligans
We've
to
certainly seen
5 have been...
successful deep mulligans.
Yeah, we've seen him win on 4 cards. We've seen wins on 5 cards. We've seen mulligans to 3.
Yeah. Elvish Mystic, the turn 1 play for Robert. He is on the play. Great start for him. Now, remember, tempered by the fact that there is not much of a supporting cast for it. Draws again here. Now, if he can get a Courser of Crufix, that's got to be the card he's looking for.
On a 5-card hand, that's got to be one of his most important pieces. Although, he is setting up here potentially for a turn 3 Whisperwood Elemental. He's got the pieces now. 2 lands, 2 mana accelerators.
Well, I was talking about some of the most generous 4-card hands you can get are 2 lands, 2 mana creatures. Robert has just that. Now, the big test is, does he have the payoff? Whisperwood Elemental, I mean, that's at the top. Interestingly, he fetches for green here as opposed to fetching for red, actually.
Yeah. Looks like that's because he already has the mountain.
Has him on. Pelucranos is the play. So what a hand here for Robert. On 5 cards, a turn 3 Pelucranos with 5 mana the next turn to kill a 2/2. That's as good as they come.
This is one of his best cards in the matchup, period.
Yeah.
Getting it ahead of schedule is awesome.
Had a schedule with the ability to eat the blocker and swing. I mean, it puts a lot of pressure on Jim to have something like Valorous Stance.
He is playing 3 copies in the main deck this weekend. And again, I'm sure that's a concession to trying to beat these devotion-style decks.
On Jim's side, he had the turn 2 Soulfire Grandmaster, played Mystic Monastery turn 3. Does have 2 mana up. We'll see whether Robert respects the Valorous Stance. He may just plow right into it.
Yep. Although if he has nothing else to do with his mana, he might just say, well, if he's got Valorous Stance, my hand's so bad anyway that it's worth trying to clock Jim as fast as possible.
And Pelucranos will swing. No response by Jim. And Robert, not wanting to get... He wants to at least take the Soulfire Grandmaster with him if it's going to be Valorous Stance. He makes no play and passes back. Jim, you see, not a great hand by own rights on his side. Outpost Siege and Treasure Cruise among the cards in his hand. Those are cards that are pretty bad, I would think, in this matchup.
I think Outpost Siege has been really an underperformer in this matchup on camera. The games are just over too fast. And often these green devotion decks have a couple Reclamation Sage hanging out in their decks for good measure as well. On a 5-card hand, you would think, well, this is the type of game where both draws are likely to be a little bit slower. Outpost Siege has a better shot at being a viable card. But even here, it feels like if Jim doesn't find Valorous Stance soon, well, this Outpost Siege just doesn't have a lot of time to do anything.
You see Jim land number 4 here. I mean, for a lot of the same reasons Treasure Cruise can be weak here, I would think.
Yes. The slow card drawers, they're good in a variety of matchups. This is not one of them.
Look at Jim's hand. Land 5, Treasure Cruise, Outpost Siege. Not much going on hills. Go ahead and swing Soulfire Grandmaster. This should force a line from Robert. He's going to block with the carry added and actually just give Jim the 2 life. A lot of patient play here from Robert. He could have gone for that kill.
Yeah, if Robert's going to win this game, it's going to be by overwhelming Jim. He doesn't care about Jim picking up 2. He's just trying not to get blown out by some random trick.
And that's a pretty heads-up play from Robert. So now what it does is it forces Jim to play this Outpost Siege set to cons and pass the turn. And now here's a spot where Robert can 100% monstrosity this Pelucranos to take care of Soulfire if he chooses to.
Yeah, and with Jim on 16, he gets to make the Pelucranos a 7/7. The Elvish Mystic and the Pelucranos represent a 2-turn clock.
Great discipline on Robert's side. So he makes the Pelucranos a 7/7, plays Courser of Crufix for the turn, and here's a swing for 8, putting Jim down to 8. And look at this. This is a 5-card hand that is just doing tons of damage.
Yep.
Over cons, the first flip off cons is Wild Slash. Jim does draw the Valorous Stance for the turn, so it gives him a bit of a reprieve, but he is far behind.
This is a good starting point, though. He can pick off the Pelucranos. He can kill the Elvish Mystic. That pins Robert's mana a little bit, takes the sting out of the Genesis Hydra for next turn. He gets closer and closer to a Treasure Cruise. He's on the back foot in a big way. It's...
Yeah, but I mean, the kill spell, like this Outpost Siege and Treasure Cruise, if you're on the kill spells plan, this is what you want to be doing.
He's got Stoke the Flames in his hand. That can take care of the Courser or likely the Genesis Hydra down the line.
Yeah, Wild Slash will take care of Elvish Mystic.
Valorous Stance has to be the starting point. For Jim to have any shot at getting back in the game, it starts here.
And here will be Valorous Stance on the Pelucranos. And Robert rolls off for the turn. It's going to be Genesis Hydra. Whisperwood Elemental lies in wait, but I don't believe he has the land for it. Courser swings for 2, puts Jim down to 8. But Robert does have a replacement Pelucranos.
And that's really bad news for Jim, for the obvious reasons.
Yeah, Robert stuck on lands, but it is not slowing him down very much. Mountain was the flip for Jim. The draw was Mantis Rider. He'll play the Mountain. Mantis Rider, a great card in the matchup as well, but Jim is on the defensive.
This is not too bad either. Jim this turn can play his Mantis Rider, attack, and then have the ability to stoke away the Courser.
So he still takes so much damage off the Pelucranos.
He does.
Though.
He's still in a spot where he needs to draw probably another Valorous Stance or some weird combination of cards to take care of the Pelucranos, but he's not out of it just yet. Still playing.
Mantis Rider is going to be the play. He'll swing for 3. Robert is at 16. And he is working his way toward a very discounted Treasure Cruise. That's the remaining card in his hand.
Yeah, he's got game. He's losing. He's behind, but he's got game.
Whisperwood Elemental to draw for Robert. He now sees the land on top of his deck. It's a Temple of Abandon. That's land 5, but it's not going to come into play untapped. It scries. And here is some bad news for Jim. The next card is Crater's Claws.
So Jim there willing to have Robert take the land, I think because he's planning on using the Mantis Rider and the Stoke to take care of Pelucranos.
And here's a swing.
It's a big cost, because now Robert also gets to play Whisperwood Elemental next turn. That extra land's a big deal. Crater's Claws is coming. A lot of bad stuff.
Jim doesn't have many ways to stop the Crater's Claws either. It's going to lethal him. I mean, the Crater's Claws means he has to, I think, block the Pelucranos here.
He can't let Robert go into next turn with a 5-power creature. And the die was cast when he said, I'll allow you to take the Temple. At that point, he was clearly committing to using the Mantis Rider and the Stoke to get Pelucranos off the table.
So here's a block. Mantis Rider in front of Pelucranos. Courser is going to come over for 2, and before damage, Mantis Rider will stoke the Pelucranos, and then it will deal 2. Deal it's 3, so Pelucranos goes down. Jim takes 2. Jim is at 6. Robert's hand is Genesis Hydra, Whisperwood Elemental, and had a Crater's Claws in hand too. So he'll go ahead and 3 Jim. Jim goes down to 3. The next draw is another Crater's Claws. Flip is Flooded Strand. Does Jim have counter spells in his main? He's going to need them.
So I think Jim can use the Flooded Strand, go down to 2, cast Treasure Cruise, and he finds Soulfire Grandmaster and burn spells. He may be able to pull himself out of Crater's Claws range. So that's the play he's got to go to.
And that's what he will do. Plays the fetch land, gets island.
I would use the term long odds. It's not likely.
Because he doesn't have the counter spell, does he?
No,
it's just the life gain.
He needs to find Soulfire Grandmaster. That's got to be the way to sort of pull back in. He's got 2 mana here, so if he draws Soulfire Grandmaster,
yeah, he has Stoke in his hand.
He can gain some life here, kill the Courser, and maybe play on. It's at least a line.
Here's Treasure Cruise. Does he find Soulfire? Can he keep going? Mantis Rider, land. That will not do it. So without that, this Crater's Claws that's about to be drawn will be lethal. Jim will represent the counterspell for it, though. Plays Mantis Rider and swings.
Well, part of the problem now is Robert has the option of just clausing for 2 and playing around Disdainful Stroke, so he doesn't even have to play into that.
Yeah, he'd have to. It would be negate. Jim has to bluff negate. Robert, as you see there, yeah, he's going to pay 3. He wants. It could be Disdainful Strokes, but Jim does not have it. So game 1 goes over to Robert Berni.
Interesting stuff there. I probably would have cast it for 2. Not sure what Robert's playing around, but so it goes. Jim with no counters in his main deck, so there you have it.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a life gain card.
But these decks realistically play?
I
haven't
don't
seen
know
it.
of one. So we have it. Game 1 over to Green-Red Devotion, and a very powerful mulligan to 5 for Robert Berni.
Oh yeah, a mana acceleration into a fast Pelucranos, and he still had Whisperwood unaccounted for at the end of that game.
Well, so we talked about Jim when he was playing against the Green-White Devotion deck. He mentioned in his sideboard a lot of the power behind a card like Erase. Because Robert's not on the white version, does Jim's sideboarding strategy change here?
A little bit. He still has access to his Valorous Stance and his 2 copies of Magma Spray, which I think are great here. Past that, I think Ash Cloud Phoenix is still fine. I think the Sarkans are maybe a little bit better in this matchup than they are against Green-White. Because Jim, the green-red build is not quite as good as going long as the green-white build is, because there's no copies of Mastery Unseen. So playing 5-mana spells are a little bit more attractive. And I think Jim brought in Sarkin against the green-white build. So if he did that, I had to imagine the same thing's coming in here.
Yeah, now on Robert's side, we saw him play this matchup earlier today, and it seemed pretty good for him. He won that one 2-0 as well in our first round of the day. A lot of it was on the back of a card like he has Nylea's Disciple. And one thing that I've liked about Robert's deck as compared to the Hal Brady white one is I think Robert's sideboard is a lot more potent in general.
He has 2 Nissa Worldwaker, 2 Nylea's Disciple, 2 Success and Tactics, a Zendikos God of Revels, 2 copies of Reclamation Sage, 2 Hornet Nest and Arbor Colossus, 2 copies of Genesis Hydra. I think that Nylea's Disciple is really solid here. The Arbor Colossus is great. Hornet Nest is pretty solid. And the extra Genesis Hydras might come in as well if he's anticipating having to play through Disdainful Strokes.
Yeah, so a lot of good things that he can do here. Hornet Nest to me is always a very interesting card. It's not a powerful card in the sense that you're playing this O2 defender for 3, but it has the potential to be really good against ground pounding decks.
Yes, it's not a card you see a ton of, but in the matchups where it's good, it's really, really good.
Yeah, definitely can see that. So one thing coming up here, we have our pre-release next weekend for Dragons of Tarkir, but with pre-release means a new set, which means a new set of Star City Games State and Regional Championships. These are the Spring State Championships, as you've seen here, and one of the differences, we have 2 events this time. It's Standard on Saturday, April 11th, and Modern on the 12th. You can find these in all 50 of the states. And they take place the weekend of the Pro Tour, so that is coming up next month. So if you're not one of the few players not invited to the Pro Tour, then you can still find a very large tournament in your area that weekend. And
part of the prizes there are exclusive top 8 play mats here. This is the one for Standard, and then the Sunday one for Modern is a little bit different. And if you're fortunate enough to win both of them or pursue them on the secondary market, you can put them together to get the full artwork.
Yeah, so we have a Saturday. The Soldiers one is for top hitting the Standard States. That's on Saturday. The Modern States on Sunday. That's the Goblins artwork. Together they make a full art picture. There's exclusive artwork playmat for each champion of each day. So not just top hitting, but you may want to try to win these. You can find out more at starcitygames.com/states for all the info on the tournament.
Looks like things are going pretty bad for the Goblins in that battle.
Well, they're under. Yeah, they're in a canyon and they're getting shot at by an archer. But part of the Goblin strategy has always been a war of attrition.
Yeah, it's a brute force sort of deal.
Goblins hold up other goblins as shields. Mm-hmm. That's how they roll. So maybe there's a lot more goblins in the pit, and this is just part of the grander scheme.
It looks like there's a lot coming up, and that human shooting down, he's only got so many arrows. So
that's goblin math here. How many arrows do you have? Well, we have a strategy now. Going into game 2, though, Robert Berni took game 1 on the mulls to 5 from each player.
And that's a spot where I thought Jim would have a pretty big edge. But Robert had the draw of acceleration into a big threat.
Well, it really seemed like the pressure is on Robert on a mull to 5 game. Can Robert, put together the pieces and create a threat? Because Jim's on a 5-card hand, he may just not be able to deal with one threat. But the question is, can Robert make one in a relevant amount of time? And the answer there was definitely yes.
A big addition to the post-board games here for Jim are 3 copies of Disdainful Stroke. That on top of his now 4 copies of Valorous Stance means he's got a pretty good game against Pelucanos.
Yeah, what I like about the Disdainful Strokes, we saw this when Anthony Lauer was playing against this deck yesterday. They're strong in the matchup, but what I like is that the Jessica aggro deck also has a clock while Disdainful Stroking things. We saw him at game where Anthony Lowry had Disdainful Stroke but no threat, and the green Devotion player simply just played more and more Genesis Hydras to plow its way through 3 copies of Disdainful Stroke.
It's not enough to have counterspells against the green Devotion decks. You need to be keeping them off balance. You need to be shortening the game, killing some mana creatures, and get them in a spot where they have no choice but to spend their entire turn on something big, and then Disdainful Stroke can be the last piece of the puzzle. But just letting them do their thing and hoping that the Disdainful Strokes can keep them off of their big plays, these green Devotion decks now are so redundant that I don't think that's a winning game plan.
All right, Berni on a mulligan to 6, but that showed no signs of slowing him down last game. We'll see if he does keep on 6, however. And yeah, Robert is good on 6, so we're underway. Both players will be on the same number of cards. Jim, though, with the tempo advantage. And pressure will be on Berni. Starts out on a Temple Abandoned. No turn 1 mana accelerator. We do see Courser of Krufix in his hand, so he will have some way to recoup that lost card. As you go back over to Jim, just 2 Mystic Monasteries to start the game. And he has a lot of hate for those early mana creatures. I really like Jim's hand. It looks to be a Wild Slash and multiple Goblin Rabble Masters. That is what I would think is a pretty good formula for this matchup.
Although without land number 3, he's in some trouble.
That is going to be some pain for Jim. No land 3. Courser for Robert. Robert does have Valorous Stance for Courser. Opts not to use it. Draws again. That's a copy of Disdainful Stroke. He'll need the mana for that.
And Stroke is about the worst draw here for Jim, because I'm sure he would have used Valorous Stance on the Courser if he knew that was what he was drawing. And now he's in the spot where he has either Valorous Stance now or just discard to hand size and hope to be able to counter something next turn.
Yeah, the question is, will he ever be able to play these cards fast enough? And he's going to go for Magma Spray Wild Slash on the Courser.
Yep. And this allows him to kill the Courser and still have the Valorous stance to handle Pelucranos.
If Robert misses the land drop, then it's a great play here. If Robert makes the Pelucranos, okay, he can still kill it.
Yeah, and Jim can now pass, take the lumps from the Pelucranos. If Robert plays something big, he can catch it with Disdainful Stroke. If not, you can Valorous Stance at the end of the turn. And, you know, playing the spells like this, obviously Jim would prefer to hit his land drops, but he is getting to the point where that Treasure Cruise is going to be on the discount because he's casting multiple spells a turn.
Draft for the turn was Seeker of the Way for Jim. Still no more lands as of yet. Pelucranos is the play from Berni.
This is not good, but it's not as bad as it appears. Jim has a lot of cheap interaction.
Well, Jim's falling into that dangerous control role we talked about, where, yeah, he can answer all of Robert's cards, but he doesn't have any pressure on. So he will have to maneuver in a way where eventually he gets a threat going to continue this game plan. Courser of Crewfix the play for Robert, and it will be Pelucranos that gets Valorous Stanced. Robert sees Genesis Hydra on top of the deck, but no land.
And that's a bit of a giveaway there. Jim took the hit, which doesn't really explain, it doesn't make any sense.
Unless you have Disdainful Stroke.
Right.
Another hit by Courser puts Jim down to 13. No land from Robert, and he'll play another Pelucranos. And I think we're going to run into that situation that we saw in the Lowry game yesterday where the Jeskai deck, with a lot of control but with no threat, is going to get ground out by Genesis Hydras.
Well, Robert's missing some land drops himself, too. So this is not the end of the world for Jim. If he has a couple red removal spells to take care of the Courser, it's very good. If Robert starts hitting his land drops, then that scenario you're describing does happen pretty fast.
Yeah, Seeker of the Way to play for Jim. I mean, at the end of the day, Davis needs to hit lands. He can't continue to miss his third land and hope something happens.
But as long as he can play defense here, then eventually he gets to a spot where he can cruise for a little bit and get something going.
Well, Robert will Genesis Hydra on 2. He sees an Elvish Mystic on top of his deck. Figures could do a lot worse there.
For sure. He just wants more mana, and he gets another shot at finding a land with Courser or Crewfix, which is very good for him as well.
Yeah. Well, what I really like about it is you see Robert has actually gotten a Nykthos into play here, and Genesis Hydra and Elvish Mystic, besides getting him a shot at Courser, which he just hit, is actually very relevant because now he has 5 Devotion to Green on the board. Next turn could be very big for Robert.
Yeah, and it felt like Jim was doing a pretty good job of, you know, plugging up the holes in the dam for a little while, but now he's starting to get overwhelmed a little bit.
So it's back to Jim. Drawing a Valorous Stance. It's got to be a frustrating game for Jim. He had a great lineup. Magma Spray, Wild Slash, and multiple Rabble Masters. That's a great recipe for beating a Devotion deck.
Yep, and unfortunately for him, still here on 2 lands.
Yeah, many turns later, facing down an army of green monsters. Genesis Hydra on the top of the deck for Robert. Mana-wise, Robert can go all the way up to 8 this turn just based on the mana, what he has in play. You may see him do just that. That Nykthos activation, that's going to be for 5, 6, 7, and 8. We're going to see Genesis Hydra on 6.
And this play motivated in part to keep Jim from being able to do anything too profitable with Disdainful Stroke.
And here's Arbor Colossus. The Arbor Colossus will be free. Does the Genesis Hydra get Disdainful Stroked? We will see. Eight mana, but it's only 6/6.
Only. Only.
Well, Jim reached for 8 on the dice, and Robert had to correct. Like, no. Only a 6/6. Yeah, he only made 12 power that turn. Makes a land off the top. Robert gains a life point, and that should just about do it. Jim has the Valorous Stance. But here comes a swing for 4 from Berni, and it's next turn's hit that's going to be the cincher.
So Berni just kind of offering up the Genesis Hydra here for not a whole lot of gain, I feel like. Because Jim has something.
Yeah, Jim's going to Valorous Stance the Arbor Colossus, block and prowess, so he gains 3 off Seeker.
I don't mind sending in just Courser in that spot.
The Genesis Hydra play does seem like you're just giving Jim some life points.
And reducing his Devotion count, too, which is pretty important with Nykthos. You know, Robert kept the Nykthos on top of his deck, too. He didn't put it on the bottom, so he's got plans for a bunch of mana. That was a pretty, I mean,
Losing, you're right, losing the 2 green mana symbols there was, I think Robert was just playing from a position of strength where he wasn't just, yeah, but there was a slight lapse for him, I think.
Yeah, this is a chance for Jim to crawl back in, because if he can get the Genesis Hydra off the table, Berni starts becoming very low on mana.
Yeah, and he did draw Mountain for the turn, so at last Jim does have his 3rd land. And because he hasn't been drawing lands, he still has more removal. You've seen his graveyard 2 Valor Stances, a Disdainful Stroke, a Wild Slash, and a Magma Spray. There's more where that came from. So here is the Mountain. Land 3. What does Jim want to do with it? He's still at a healthy 12. See, Rabble Master, Lightning Strike. I don't know if he has more copies of Valorous Stance, and he may need those to deal with cards like Genesis Hydra.
The starting point here has to be getting the Genesis Hydra off the table, because I believe Robert has Crater's Claw. So if he's able to keep a 6/6 into play, I don't think Jim can recover.
Wow, and you're right. Losing those green mana symbols, especially when Robert has the Crater's Claws in hand, is a setback.
Well, I think Jim's just dead. Robert can generate enough mana, and he's got 6
he's
power
just dead
creature
right now.
Yeah.
So 5. He taps the Nykthos for 5. That's 6, 7, 8. He does have 9. Can make 9 mana. That's Claws for 8. Ferocities to 10. He's gonna make Whisperwood Elemental. Play another Nykthos. Okay, so that first one's for 5, and this should just be lethal. So that makes the Devotion up to 7. This Nykthos now taps for 7. Okay, he's gonna be 1 short, I believe, but he does have 1 for the attacker. Yeah. So Devotion's at 7, so now I can tap the Nykthos for 7. No, he'll still be 1 short. But he can. Jim has to chump the whole team away. Just Genesis Hydra swings. Robert about to swing both and realizing, okay, a double block. He doesn't want to lose the Courser. There doesn't seem to be a good way for Jim to get out of this. He may be able to make it to next turn, but it won't be with anything relevant.
Right.
And then here's Crater's Claws. And Jim, clearly frustrated, had a great hand, but was not in his day to be. Robert Berni, 2-0, takes down the match. He stays at 2 losses, moves to 11-2. Berni is 4-0 on the day for Jim Davis. That's his first loss of the day, drops to 3-1 on the day, but at 11-2, still in a spot to make a shot at top 8.
And Robert here in a great position to defend the Texas Open title. The winner of Houston here in February and now in Dallas, and things are looking very good. 11-2 with 2 rounds to go.
Right now, hometown, the hometown hero fends off the Northerners for the time being.
So congratulations to Robert Berni. Again, a player who thought that he was going to be moving overseas here last month. Houston was supposed to be his last stateside tournament in a while. His job in the Philippines got pushed back a little bit, and so he's competing here in Dallas and making the most of his opportunity.